One man, one day, needed the shoes, but it cost him a life.
Man, I really want these shoes, but I don't have the money. I guess I gotta go kill him. Hey! I need those shoes, man! Dude, it's jammed. It's not working, man. You want to throw hands? You're dead, punk. These shoes are mine. Oh, yeah. Look at these sweet shoes. I gotta put them on now. Man, hopefully no one saw that. I gotta go. Love my new shoes, man.
Here to buy my shoes. Where are my shoes? Wait, someone should probably call the cops.
This is a crime scene!
Looks like we got ourselves our first point of evidence. A little footy print headed due north. Come with me. Let's see what else we can find.
Oh my gosh! It's like he wanted us to catch him!
Our fool's first bullet shell. Oh my goodness.
Let's see where that... But it looks to me as this man has no bullet wounds. I wonder how he could be bleeding. Oh my gosh! There's a knife and shoes? I bet we could use this as some evidence.
Dr. Detective here. Today we're going to be going over the miscellaneous evidence that Mrs. Nelson in the field got today when she stumbled across this crime scene. She wasn't too good, so we're going to do an analysis of her analysis, get more in depth. So here we are. Mrs. Nelson, looks like she found a footprint leading towards the crime scene. That's what she told me. We got to do some analysis back in the lab, get maybe some molds of those footprints. So she's looking at it, and there's a bystander, and looks like the killing in the background. And as she's walking over, just outside of the pan of the camera, we did find a 1911 Chamberlain 45, and oh, look at that. 45 brass shell, one of them. Only one shot was heard from the bystander. Brass was found, and it was a 45 caliber brass casing. We need to go back to the lab and look at the firing pins, see if it matches to that same gun. Get some fingerprints off that gun. See who owns that gun, who it's registered in. And then we see bystander, need to get out of there. And as we can see, walking up to the crime scene. Looks like there's a big gash on that arm, a lot of blood, and a lot of blood on the ground as well. Maybe some shoes. We don't know if those are the shoes from that case or the victim's shoes or the criminal's shoes. We don't know. And then here we go, walking, knife. Maybe that probably did cause that gashing on the man's arm down there. Probably get some fingerprints off there too. And back to the shoes. We don't know what those shoes are. We're gonna do some more work in the lab.
Okay, after some analysis, these are our three suspects. First one, Suspect 1, Parker Nelson. Suspect 2, Courtney Krotzer. Suspect 3, Oliver Kinsel. Suspect 1, Parker Nelson. He was an avid shoe collector, maybe because he's a runner. Not so good social skills. Owns weapons or has history of owning weapons. Serious watch tan. Won't shut up ever and doesn't crack any funny jokes. Does know how to shoot a gun. He was reported near the scene during the time of the crime, and his quote was, he was going for a run. Somehow got good grades this semester and does own a dog. Suspect 2, Courtney Krotzer. She is the stereotypical dumb blonde. She is an avid shoe collector. She was a bystander / that Instagrammer we saw in the previous video. She's too incompetent to kill anyone. Has a history of weapons. King Supers member. Drives a Honda. Very angry and feisty over fashion. And a quote from her is, would kill for some new kicks. does not have a good poker face, and she does own a cat. Suspect 3, Oliver Kinsel. Avid shoe collector, shoots guns and holds knives daily. Will make you know he likes Texas University. He is a bench lacrosse player, 1.2 GPA. He did make $1,000 off online gambling last week. Was near the scene, quote, smoking a non-nicotine cig because I want to save my lungs but look good, end quote. History of violent behavior towards guys with mustaches. Coincidence? I think not. Owns a lizard and a pet rock. And did I mention he is a bench lacrosse player? So these are our 3 suspects. We're going to go to the evidence table and try to link it together and try to put together this crime.
So what we know about the victim? The victim, age 23, male, name, Nathan Walker. He was known to have depressive and suicidal thoughts. He was a good fighter and known to put up one, bad golfer. Resold shoes for a living, but jacked up prices and usually had angry customers. But overall with his family and friends, he had good relations with them.
Alrighty, so today we're going to be going over a brief view of all the evidence we got from the scene. So first off, we did find some dog hair on the Hoka Birkenstocks that we found. On the left is the raw dog hair, on the right is a microscopic image of it. So here we are. On the right is the raw image of the body, right as it was found by the bystander. We got some good photos from her. And on the left is when we took the body back to the lab. You can see that knife cut, or we presume to be cut on the top with some dried blood. So here is the bullet shell we did find with that firing pin impression. And then this image is the 3 guns that we got. Each row pertains to a certain firing pin impression. Each row is a certain gun. And then here, top left, we're going to start with the top left, is that Hoka/Birkenstock hybrid. And in the bottom right is a better analysis of it. That's the impression we got from the mud. Top left is the mud. Top right is the mud that we found with that Adidas/Nike hybrid. On the bottom left is the impression of it we made from the plaster. A bit better analysis we got from that. And then here we are, some miscellaneous evidence like that shoebox. We're going to see if that shoebox has any evidence. The Birkenstock/Hoka combo, the knife that was found at the scene, and then the 1911 that was also found at the scene.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. In today's presentation, I'll be examining a specific wound pattern that forensic experts like me classify as a swipe injury, one likely inflicted by a highly sharpened knife. But more than that, we will explore how this injury, especially the blood evidence left behind, plays a vital role in reconstructing the events of this crime committed, potentially identifying the perpetrator. Let's begin. With the wound itself, you can see it is a clean, deep laceration with smooth and well-defined edges. That tells us a lot right away. Unlike blunt force trauma, which tends to create jagged or irregular tears, this cut is surgical in nature. The characteristic of a sharp force injury, meaning the object had a very fine, honed edge. We're not talking about just any blade, one capable of slicing through skin and tissue with minimal resistance, something like a kitchen knife or tactical blade. The shape of the wound is also important. It appears linear and consistent in depth along most of its length, which suggests a controlled slicing motion, rather than a frenzied or erratic attack. The tapering at one or both ends indicates that the blade was drawn across the skin at an angle. The wound began or ended with varying pressure. These subtle characteristics help forensic pathologists assess the direction of force and the attacker's position, and even whether the wound was self-inflicted or defensive. Now, let's talk about the blood. What we see in this image is extensive blood flow coming downward. This tells us the wound is active, fresh, and likely under pressure from the cardiovascular system. The sheer amount and direction of the blood suggests arterial gush. This is if the wound intersected a major blood vessel, such as the radial or ulnar artery in the forearm. The victim could begin to bleed out rapidly, within minutes, especially if left untreated. This blood pattern becomes incredibly useful in the scene recreation process. Detectives can analyze the flow, volume, and direction of the blood to determine where the victim was when the injury occurred, whether they moved afterward, and how quickly the blood loss progressed. If the scene lacks large amounts of blood, this means that the injury occurred elsewhere and the body was moved to the new location. From a forensic standpoint, this is where evidence begins to connect. If a knife is recovered from the scene, we compare its blade length, width, and tip shape to the physical characteristics of the wound. Matching size and geometry strengthens the link between the weapon and the injury. And if that same knife bears traces of the victim's blood or DNA, this becomes a critical junction of biological and physical evidence. In this particular case, the wound's depth, clean margins, and extensive bleeding all point to a single, well-aimed strike with a sharp blade. Definitely performed by a trained person. Potentially fatal if not yet immediately treated. It wasn't a hesitant or glancing wound, it was deliberate and forceful. This suggests a thought-out plan and intent.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today I'll be presenting the fingerprint evidence recovered from the murder weapon, specifically two district fingerprints found on the handle of the knife. Our objective was to compare these prints to 3 suspects to determine who, if anyone, can be forensically linked to the weapon through fingerprint analysis. Let's begin by examining the two prints we found on the knife. The left fingerprint shows the central whorl pattern, concentric ridges spiraling around the core with multiple clear minutiae, including bifurcations where a ridge splits, ridge endings, and small enclosures where a ridge loops back and reconnects. This print also features a prominent delta to the lower left. A right loop pattern, ridges entering from the left, looping upward and exiting to the right. It displays a strong ridge flow and several identifiable minutiae. At least 2 bifurcations, 3 ridge endings, and a small dot or island ridge near the center. Now let's look at the suspects, starting with suspect number 1. Upon comparison, their right thumb print is a whorl pattern that matches the left latent print with impressive precision. Key minutiae such as a bifurcation at 2 o'clock, a ridge ending near the lower delta, and the overall symmetry of the whorl all aligning. Even convictingly, suspects number 1, right index finger, print a right loop, matching the second fingerprint lifted from the knife. The ridge count between the core and the delta, along with the positions of bifurcation and ridge endings, are consistent between the suspect's print and the one recovered. These 2 matches, 1 for each fingerprint, establish a high confident identification. Now let's rule out the others. Suspect number 2 has a right thumb that shows a loop, not a whorl, immediately disqualifying from matching the print. Their right index finger, which also a loop, lacks the correct ridge count, also does not have matching minutiae in the right positions. The loop is also oriented more steeply and has a different core placement. Suspect number 3 has a whorl pattern, but when examined closely, the ridge structure and minutiae spacing differ significantly from the whorl on the knife. Their loop pattern prints also lack alignment with the second fingerprint and does not present the same bifurcation or dot structures. In conclusion, after comparing all three suspects' fingerprints sets to the prints found on the weapon, we can definitely say that suspect 1 is the match. The minutia, ridge patterns, and structure layout, both prints align strongly with their right thumb and index finger. Suspect 2 and 3 were both included based on mismatched patterns and ridge detail. This matches place suspect 1's hands on the weapon, a crucial piece of physical evidence directing tying them to the scene. And with the fingerprints of our suspect number 1 was Parker Nelson. Hello everyone. Today I'll be presenting a forensics analysis of hair sample under a microscope and explaining how we can determine that this hair came from a dog, not from a human. First, let's take a look at the most obvious features. The medulla, or the central core of the hair. In the sample, the medulla is thick and runs constantly through the entire shaft. That's our first big clue. In human hair, the medulla is usually very thin or fragmented, or sometimes even absent. But in many animal hairs, especially dog hairs, the medulla is typically wide and continuous, just like what we see here. Next, we examine the cortex, which is the layer surrounding the medulla. It contains the pigment that gives the hair its color. In human hair, pigment tends to appear uneven or clumped. In this sample, however, the pigment is evenly spaced, which is another indicator that this hair is from an animal. This kind of consistent pigmentation is common in dog hair. We can also consider the size and structure of the hair. The diameter of this hair is relatively narrow, and the medulla takes up a large portion of the shaft. In human hair, the medulla unusually occupies a much smaller fraction. The proportionate here suggests this is likely canine or a guard hair. These microscope details, the thick, continuous medulla, the even pigment distribution, and the high medulla to shaft ratio, all points to this being a dog hair, not human one. In forensic science, identifying hair like this can help place a suspect or victim at a scene. In forensic science, for example, if a suspect has a dog hair on their clothing that matches hair found at a crime scene, it can help link them to their location or animal. While hair alone isn't always conclusive, it can be powerful evidence. So, in conclusion, carefully, the microscope analysis of the hair structure clearly identifies it is a dog hair, which could be an important detail in forensics investigation. And back to our suspects. All three owned a pet. All three own pets. As we know, Parker and Courtney both own dogs. So that leaves us them two. Oliver owned multiple snakes. We didn't ask too many questions after that.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'll be walking you through an important piece of forensics evidence recovered from a recent crime scene in a single 9mm Luger cartridge casing. Though it might appear small and insignificant, this casing holds vital information about the weapon used in the shooting. When a firearm is discharged, several distinct marks are left on the cartridge casing. These marks are produced by contact with specific parts in the firearm's internal mechanism. Today we'll be focusing on two key types of marks: firing pin impression and breech face marks. The firing pin impression is the indentation made when the firing pin strikes the primer at the center of the cartridge. This initiates the ignition of gunpowder inside the round. Importantly, the shape, depth, and orientation of this indentation are influenced by the unique wear and microscopic imperfections of the firing pin in each individual gun. Breech face marks are caused when the cartridge is forced back against the breech face, the flat surface at the rear of the chamber. As the bullet is fired like a fingerprint, the surface of each breech face carries tiny, unique saturation. That transfer onto the casing. When both the firing pin impression and the breech face marks are present and well defined, they can be used to match a casing to a specific firearm with a high degree of confidence. In this case, we recovered one spent casing at the crime scene. After photographing, examining it under a microscope, we compared it to a set of 9 test fire casings grouped into 3 rows. Each row represents 3 shots fired from a different firearm labeled here as the gun. Gun 1, gun number 2, and gun number 3, top to bottom. And each gun was owned to a suspect. By closely analyzing the impression on the crime scene casing, we noted several distinctive features: a deep round central impression, evenly centered with a small raised ring around the edge, and faint radial drag marks, likely from the firing pin slightly moving upon impact. These features were then compared across the test casings. Row 1. Gun 1 shows consistent impressions with the shape and depth differ impressions that are broader and shallower. Row 2. Gun 2 had a firing pin that were slightly off center and irregular in depth. However, row 3, gun 3, presented an exact match. All 3 casings had a firing pin impression that were nearly identical to our crime scene. Evidence in size, depth, and placement. The breech face markings also aligned a subtle striped pattern that repeats across both the crime scene casing and gun 3's test firings. Given these consistencies, we can confidently conclude that the casing found at the scene was fired from gun number 3. This is a powerful lead. If we can trace that firearm to a specific person through the ownership records possession at the time of the crime or witness testimony, we begin to tie the suspect directly to the shooting. In conclusion, the single piece of brass, a shell casing, has provided us with scientifically reliable link to a specific firearm and possibly to the person who fired it. This is the strength of forensics ballistics, taking on what seems like a small ordinary object and turning it into a critical piece of evidence. Thank you for listening. Good afternoon, everyone. Today we're going to take a brief look at the forensics analysis of some footprints found at a crime scene. These impressions left in the sand piece together a timeline of events, movement, and possibly identify individuals involved. We have 2 distinct types of footprints here: a Birkenstock with a Hoka logo on the bottom half of the shoe, and one from an Adidas Continental shoe, but on the outside it looks like a Nike Dunk. Now let's start with the Hoka/Birkenstocks. These are clearly seen moving toward the crime scene. The impressions are deep, well defined, especially in the heel and midfoot area. That tells us the person was walking with intent and pressure, likely approaching, but not running or backing away. On the other hand, the Adidas, maybe Nike Dunks, not quite sure yet, are headed away from the scene. They are slightly shallower, not as much pressure, and more spread out, which could suggest a quicker pace, possibly someone leaving in a hurry, like they maybe heard a gunshot or they did the crime. So what does this tell us? Well, it paints a possible story. The individual wearing Hoka/Birkenstock shoes arrived at the scene either as a participant, witness, or victim. The person in Adidas/Nike's disguised shoes was likely already there, arrived earlier, or was reacting to a crime that already happened. Importantly, the sand captured these prints with excellent detail. We can see branding, tread, patterns, and pressure distribution. That helps us match shoes and potentially individuals more confidently. In summary, the evidence suggests a one-way approach by the Hoka/Birkenstocks and a one-way retreat by Adidas/Nike. It's not enough to prove guilt, but it's a strong piece of the puzzle that helps us reconstruct what happened at the scene. But while searching the suspect's home, they all seem like they own pairs of multiple shoes, but all own the Hoka Birkenstocks combo. One of the officers thinks he caught a glimpse of the Adidas Nike crossover shoe in Parker Nelson's house, which is a testimony for the court. Thank you.
Today I'll be walking through two techniques that I used in my forensics investigation. How fingerprints can be removed or recovered from a knife, and how to make a mold of a shoe print found at the crime scene. Let's start with the fingerprints. A knife handle is a common surface where latent fingerprints, or those that are left behind by natural skin oils, can be found. First, most important, PPE, latex gloves. This is to avoid contaminating the evidence. Second, visually inspect the knife under good lighting. Sometimes you can see the fingerprints even without enhancement. Then, using fingerprint powder and a brush, I would gently swirl the powder over the knife handle. The powder sticks to the fingerprint residue. Once a clear print is visible, I'd use lifting tape to transfer the print onto a print card. Finally, label and photograph everything carefully to maintain the chain of custody. These prints can be compared against known fingerprints in a database or a suspect list. Now, let's talk about the shoes. When a suspect walks through mud or dirt or sand, they can leave detailed impressions that can be used for comparison. First, protect the shoe print. Mark it. Take multiple photographs from different angles. If the print is delicate, I might spray a fixative like hairspray to help the detail. Then I'd create a frame around the print using cardboard strips. This contains the casting material. Then I'd mix plaster with water to the consistency of watery pancake batter. Then pour it gently beside the print so it flows in. After letting it harden for about an hour, carefully lift the mold out. Just like the fingerprints, I'd label and document it for evidence. The final mold preserves all details like tread patterns or wear marks, which can be matched to a suspect's shoe.
The final verdict. All the evidence leads to Parker Nelson. The fingerprints that we gathered and the ones that we concluded from the knife and the gun were for Parker Nelson. And the dog hair. That was his dog. So we got a warrant and raided his house, and we found the shoes, the knife, and all the other evidence that was his, those sweet new kicks he killed for, in his closet. We shall go to court and provide the evidence to the jury.
Parker Nelson, does this look like your 1911 chambered in .45?
Yes, Your Honor.
And did you own these Birkenstocks?
Yes, Your Honor.
And did you own this blue Microtech knife?
Yes, Your Honor.
And now, do you have in your possession a brand new pair of Nikes?
Yes, Your Honor.
We believe that Parker Nelson is guilty.
Parker Nelson, I hereby sentence you to life in jail. Case closed.
So that's it. That's the finale. Parker Nelson killed a man for some sweet kicks.